Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another Wolfram Language Design Review, part of our Language Completeness and Consistency series. I see we have a few topics here.
Yeah.
Association constructors should return the result of the evaluation. What is
Right.
this?
So right now, association, if you give it something that's, not actually a bunch of rules, then it'll evaluate all of the arguments to see if they become rules. And if it fails, then it returns the original input expression.
Okay.
Right. So, Ricardo thinks that it should return the evaluated arguments. So it should,
Why?
So his argument is that he was invited. I'm not sure if he joined us. Doesn't look like he's joined us. But basically he thinks that, it's sort of easier for error checking and
Well,
if
this case doesn't look very compelling to me with echo, but maybe there are cases that are more compelling.
right.
I mean, I do tend to think if it evaluated them, it might as well show it evaluated them. It's very obscure. If it evaluates them, it doesn't show that it evaluated them. If you get what
There
I'm
is
saying.
one downside with that it's going to go and evaluate it again and fail again. So that's
If what? If it
if
doesn't,
if you return association with the evaluated expression is going to go through the evaluator again, see a different expression, and go and evaluate and go back to the association code and fail.
Yeah, I get
you
it.
tag
I
it?
mean, well, I don't know. I mean,
we don't have a mechanism to tag it.
isn't association a raw object?
No. If it constructs an association, if it succeeds in, we're talking about the case when it fails to construct an association, where it gets input that's not able to construct an association.
Yeah, I understand. So this is the invalid flag.
Yeah, exactly. It's an invalid thing. So I'm against it from the fact that it's just going to go through and evaluate everything again and fail again, and that just seems like a lot of work. We're adding work to show the evaluated expression, and then we're going and evaluating it again and failing again.
Well, I think that's an implementation issue. I think from the user point of view, it will be better if if it evaluated, show it evaluated. Because otherwise people will be confused because that thing might have had a big complicated thing in it, has a bunch of side effects. The side effects happened. It's like, really? Did they happen? No, it looks like they didn't happen. But I take your point about implementation, and I guess Ricardo is not here to make his case. But if that's what we're talking about you're saying these other cases like and don't have this issue that they are, idempotent in some sense.
Right.
They change.
Right. So, right. And will attempt to get to true or false. And, once it knows it's false, it knows it can stop. Right.
Well, I take Ricardo's point. I think it might be slightly better, but there's this implementation issue, and I think that probably blocks it for the time being.
Sorry, that implementation issue was just a performance issue that it would go through the evaluator again. And if it's invalid, then does it matter?
That's a good point.
So say that again.
If it's an error case, if it's an error branch anyway, does it matter? That's a fair point. I mean, this is not a success branch.
Right. Although it's also not necessarily a failure branch because, consider the case of, association of blank.
It's pretty weird.
It's not that weird. Association of blank is not a weird.
Not useful. Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't see a compelling case for having it evaluated.
Well, I'm telling you the case. The point is it's obscure to people, but it does evaluate, but it doesn't show you it evaluated. We don't have other examples of that. We don't have other examples of things that at least I'm not thinking of one, that reach in, evaluate, and then don't admit it.
Well, we have those three examples in the gray bullet points. And I don't know if that's deliberate.
Which one? These ones here.
Yes. I don't know if that's deliberate or an accident of implementation.
No, wait a minute. So those do the thing that Ricardo is proposing that association does.
No, these do the thing of evaluating their arguments, but then if it's a failure case, returning unevaluated.
Oh boy. Well, I mean, clearly we need some consistency here.
Here, let me see if I can't.
Hey, I have a question for you design-oriented folk here. There was a function that we invented, I think you might have been involved in this, about a year ago, that allows you to store a collection of bytes and tag it as being, oh, this collection of bytes represents a JPEG. We invented that for some kind of import situation. Maybe XML related, I'm not sure. Do you remember what it is?
Boy, it was more than a year ago, but I do know what you're talking about, and when I reconstruct the name.
It was a year ago.
I think it was imported. I think it was imported object.
Oh, that's right.
And it was in 2020. So,
well, with the whole pandemic thing,
yes,
it just seems like no time has passed. Why is this so slow? Why is that? Why was that so slow? Is our node here? Why was that so slow?
Our node is not here.
Okay, so record that moment in this video. Show it to him, please. It's a problem for 14. Am I making sense? I typed the name. I want to see the output immediately, not in 7 years. Okay, this is the thing. Okay, can you Julio needs to know about this. It's come up for a machine learning application. Could somebody communicate that to him? Should I do it?
I can take care of that.
Okay. This is an interesting construct, in my opinion. It's a useful construct for various purposes. I think he needed it for some communication to multimodal LLMs. Okay.
Right. So basically, Ricardo's argument is that if you have some blob that you expect will be have some side effects and produce an produce an association, if something goes wrong, and then you might, and some piece of code processes that result, then you might run those side effects a second time.
Another argument is, I don't want something that walks and talks like an association, but clearly isn't one. I mean, it's sort of interesting that doesn't give a message. Why doesn't it?
Probably the pattern case. You could use whole pattern, of course, but
right. Obviously, association of blank should not give a message.
No, it shouldn't give a message, but that doesn't mean association of 1,3 does. Given that we've now admitted that we are looking at these things. It's not like it's just passing and saying it's not a rule, go away. See what I'm saying?
I don't know, the message based on number of arguments.
Well, we could just give a red red caret based on that number of arguments. And I think we could give a message saying this isn't a valid association.
So what about association of 1?
That's not a valid association.
An association of blank
is. Okay, I can't justify that very well. I can, because, if the thing couldn't have a rule, it's not a valid association.
I can't do lookup on that last thing. It's not very association.
No. I understand, but it could be a rule. In the co-substitution world of that thing, which we still haven't really developed, and that's a future thing to do, the whole theory of, substitution and co-substitution and so on, of what could be, that thing could be a rule. It could stand for a rule. Whereas association of 1 could not stand for a rule.
I'm sorry, did you claim that there is some argument counting reason that there should be a red caret or something there? Because I didn't follow that at all.
Wait a minute, is that, oh no, association, I never use it.
Association does not take a list. Association takes a sequence of rules.
I mean, it will also accept a list, but
yeah, well,
yeah,
yes.
okay, I use it in the list form always. Okay, fine. Forget my argument counting argument.
Yeah.
Look, without Ricardo here, I don't think we can make this case any further. I don't think this is a very important corner case. I think I do take the point I think Jeremy made here that this is an error case, and so if it does have to redo the evaluation in this case, it's not disastrous. But I don't have a strong feeling about this, but we need consistency with these other things, and I don't understand that.
okay.
So let's see, evaluation object. What the heck is the N there? What is N?
I think that's probably like the kernel number or something. I'm not sure. Does it?
What is this piece of incredibly bad documentation?
Well, it's something written by Roman. So what do you expect?
I'm sorry, but this has to be better. This is just inadequate. Just totally inadequate. Okay, so somebody needs to deal with that, please. How could this have been there since version 7 with something as pathetic as that in there?
Because you don't take a close look at what Roman is doing.
Well, apparently not adequately so.
Yeah.
I can't believe this is that old.
Yeah, I mean, I think the formatting changed a few versions ago. Although
okay, so then okay, can somebody please push this and get something less sloppy? But let's go on with our agenda.
Okay. Right. So you had this sort of two-part suggestion of being able to set history length at a notebook level. Which, I think the implementation might require a bit of thought, but, that's, just like you can set the context and context path to be notebook specific or cell group specific,
What would this mean, that the history length is notebook specific? I don't understand it, because the history is a single thread in the kernel.
It's not technically a single thread in some cases. I don't know anything about this proposal, but it is already the case that we track history separately in different cell contexts. So if you have two context isolated notebooks, they will not share history with one another.
Do you mean out will be different in each of them?
That's exactly what I mean, yes.
Right,
Oh.
like
I mean, the docs work this way.
Right,
Yeah.
like go into that documentation notebook and evaluate one cell in one example and then refer to %1 in the other example.
And the way this is done, I mean, it's kind of fairly naive because I don't think anything more is really required, which is just that, we take the, as we're switching context, we take the current value of in string, out, and there might be something else I'm forgetting, and we just shove them off someplace where they can be gotten back again later, and then replace them with the values of the incoming cell context.
All right, so let's talk about what that means for history length. So that means in this notebook, what would it look like here? Wait a minute. Addition to percent. By the way, what has happened to percent modernization? Didn't make it into 14.0.
Hyperarchitecture.
What does that mean?
But you can't drop a project on my group that consumes 50% of the time and then expect all the other projects to proceed smoothly.
Is it proceeding percent modernization?
It requires a lot of my direct attention. My direct attention has been focused in other places, which are considered important. I mean, it's,
I think percent modernization is pretty important.
Is it more important than hyperarchitecture?
I don't know. No, probably not. I mean, depending on assuming we can get it
that's
delivered.
what it comes down to, We have lots of things that we consider very important, and it's, decisions have to be made.
I wish I'd known that was being paused. We really need a better mechanism for that. I mean, that's a thing that's on the global project list. It went from being in progress to paused. Is that correct?
Well, I didn't officially hit the pause button, but I did, produce a roadmap which had a pretty optimistic notion of our ability to make progress by, I didn't take it off the roadmap, but frankly, other things on the roadmap.
We really need to get on with it. We really need to get on with it. We really can't have it just languish.
I actually have to make decisions on the ground about how time is spent.
I understand, but I would like to hear about
and I can't just torpedo other parts of the company that are depending on my group to do stuff.
I understand. Well, okay, separate discussion. We should talk about. I mean, I would like to hear about this because it was something I thought was going to happen, and I didn't pay attention for 14.0. All right. In any case. This question here, I mean, the issue here is, do we store the out? Because there are plenty of cases where we just don't care. It doesn't matter whether the out is, whether the stuff in the output is stored.
Like
if it isn't stored,
like what?
It isn't, by the kernel.
Sorry, what's the case where we don't care? Sorry.
Okay, a giant piece of graphics was produced. We will never refer to the graphics with percent. We produced that graphics only for the sake of displaying it on the screen.
Can you really say that though? I mean,
no, you can't possibly mean that.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Right, and so
okay, but I mean, okay. So what is the issue here?
Right. Well,
go ahead.
So, right. So, all right. So the starting point of all this was, when you're doing really memory intensive things like FEM, then, it's quite common to, set $history length to 0. And
okay, this was because Oliver, who may or may not be here, was doing that in his documentation, which really upset me.
Yes. And
okay, so why was he doing it again? Can you explain that to me?
There's two reasons. One is to make sure that the reference count of object that's produced is uniquely owned by the symbol to which it's referenced. So the out doesn't add a second reference, because then you can work. If you do things incrementally, then on that object, you're working on a unique object.
That's a total hack.
You don't need to make a copy of it.
Yeah, okay, that's a total hack.
Yeah, hack it may be, but we don't have an alternative.
It's a total hack. And okay, so we need to talk about the design.
Wait. You're saying that the automatic memory management of the kernel is a total hack?
No, I'm saying that that way of avoiding it is a total hack. If the issue is, okay, if the issue is that you want to modify, you have x equals giant expression, right? And then you want to say x equals a new expression, and you don't want the old value of x hanging around. Well, I understand that it might be hanging around because it was connected to out 17.
That's
Exactly.
That's exactly.
Right. And you don't want that. So
and
this
you
is
don't want
exactly
that.
the case that I was describing, where you want the output of x equals blip, big giant thing, and you don't want that big giant thing attached to the out symbol.
Yeah.
That's the case we were describing. Somebody just said was a stupid case. But
Well,
that's
no,
exactly
you
the case
you
we're talking
said
about.
No.
we said that the graphic that just saying you would
Now,
never
that particular example wasn't wise, but there might be other ones.
I mean, here you've assigned it to X. In the example previously, you said it was only referenced by in and out or whatever. So that if you remove the in and out, there's no way to reference it. I think that it's slightly different.
Yes,
I see.
That's what I was understanding you to say.
I see. So I mean, one case here would be the thing has been attached to something.
Yeah.
And we know that because we can know that. And then the question is, do you also attach it to the out thing? And there's the possibility then of saying, I mean, I think both cases are of some interest, right? Where, even if you can't refer to it programmatically, it might just be, I've certainly done things where I'm spewing out giant collections of things where all I want is their appearance in the notebook. I will never, ever refer to them. It's like print output, basically. See what I'm saying? I'm not going to refer to print output, and I can't, in fact. So in other words, I'm using my outlines like print output.
Yep.
Should there be a wrapper, / don't attach to out?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea.
That's a bit cleaner. Don't store on out.
Yeah, it's kind of like a quiet, except it isn't
I
quiet.
think that's implementable.
Yeah. And sort of one issue
That's clean.
Right. And one issue that people run into, at least naive users, is that they think that adding a semicolon is equivalent to that, but that merely suppresses output. It doesn't remove the doesn't actually remove the association.
Okay, but look, the case we care about is the thing's a gigabyte, right? Which is a case we can detect. I mean, we just don't care if the thing is 100 kilobytes or something. We just don't care that it's being stored. We do care if the thing's a gigabyte.
Well, so that opens up another possibility. We have, for front-end output, we have an output size limiter.
Yeah, we have the output limiter, which is very successful.
Yeah. One could imagine a similar approach to limiting whether or not something gets assigned to the down values of out.
Why not? And then have the output there. If you looked at the down value of out, it would be an output limiter, basically. It will be a size limiter.
But you wouldn't be able to, retrieve the real thing.
So it would have to be a size. Yeah, it would have to be a size limiter that is, that can't be fully expanded.
Well, but the way to do it would be if it's on an outline, there was an inline. You could have snarfed in the inline, or at least that. No. Here's the point. It came from out 17. If you really want to know what's going on, reevaluate in 17.
Well, so assuming that that's assuming
no state change. Yeah, I understand. There might be state change, but I mean, I don't think that's the. I think that's nothing's going to be perfect here, but at least you don't blow yourself up with multi-gigabyte objects. Okay, so we got two ideas on the table. One is a / don't store. What the heck should that be called?
Suppress.
Yeah, I would call it no out.
Yeah. Outless. I would hate to suggest without out.
Yes.
As opposed to without, so to speak, which is just
Yeah.
totally confusing. Let me see. What's a don't include type word?
Exclude?
What's that? Exclude out. That's too weird.
Skip out?
Avoid.
Skip out is better, but then no, that suggests it's like a kangaroo or something.
Suppress out.
But we're not really suppressing it. We're suppressing
This.
We're
For
not.
this
We're not. We're not.
people.
We're not. No, it would still display. It just wouldn't have. It wouldn't attach the out.
Well, then it's history. Suppress history. Well, that suggests that's global. That's scary.
How about that?
Or history avoid. Ahistoric.
Paleolithic?
Yeah.
Block out.
Out or block history. Yeah. Amnesia.
Counterfactual. No. It's a different meaning from block in our
Yeah,
block
it is.
construct.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Ephemeral.
No, no, no. Because none of that stuff. We don't want to. We just want to make it clear that it's just. I mean, given that we have dollar history length, no history seems.
So you would still see the thing.
You'd still see it.
Right. So you could do semicolon / avoid history. That sounds like you chose French instead.
So what's the difference between / name we haven't come up with yet and / print? Other than the type of the cell is different.
Well, the print doesn't get the output size limiter, so that's
Doesn't it?
no.
No.
Actually, if you did print, it would still store the history, I think.
No, it doesn't.
No, because it'll
I think it would. I think it would.
I think
How would
Because
it
the
store
last
it?
value would still be.
No.
Sorry, this is getting into real hackery. I think you'll find it does.
Where?
No, I'm pretty sure % is null in that case.
Yeah,
I'm about to
because
check
the
it.
result of
Yeah,
print is
percent is
null,
null.
isn't
I
it?
don't think so. It
The
doesn't.
result of print is
It'll
null.
use
So it
last
will be
value.
null.
But
I thought it was only compound
put a
expression, which means
sorry,
that I think
put a
that even
semicolon. Do print semicolon. Put a semicolon in there. In the print foo, put a semicolon in there.
After the print foo.
Inside the print.
But that's not going to print anything.
but then it will
Now
print
put
null.
bar. Now put bar.
Inside the print.
Oh.
Right. Yeah, put bar there. Now look at %. Yeah, there you go.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah, this is the last value hackery we have.
Wow. That's really Paleolithic.
Sure.
I mean, that came from version 1. That came from teleprinter type stuff.
Sort of.
That's wild.
that is, yeah. I guess I just assumed that, So why doesn't the print foo case?
Because last value, if you did a
It's a
semicolon
piece of
print
bug
foo,
hackery.
do a semicolon print foo, then percent would be a.
Right.
Now percent should be a. Yeah, it is.
That's really weird.
Yeah, it is.
And probably
Well, I
shouldn't
mean
run.
that I understand. That right, that's
Yeah.
the last value thing. It's the fact that the compounded expression is inside of the print. So I would have thought that, you know, it would the
I
print
mean,
would
maybe compound expression at the top level should be treated differently, but I don't know if I thought that through.
Oh, that's just weird. That's just weird.
Yeah, it's weird.
I think this is a bug, which has been there for 35 years.
I was going to say the number of people that behavior surprised and the set of that people is impressive.
It didn't surprise me.
No, but you were the exception, Tom. Everybody else, you know,
It didn't surprise Mark, but it surprised everybody else on the planet.
Well, I think that suggests that I think we should look at changing this. Okay, but let's go back to this question about. Okay, first point. What about the possibility? Let's say you generate a huge output. Okay, huge this thing is going to be huge. Okay. What if there was a UX? Let's see.
And of
let's
course,
imagine that
is,
you generate an output. There are two things. One, you might generate an output size limiter in the front end, which could then have some extra, blobs on it. And two, you might not generate an output limiter because the thing might just be a summary blob of some kind, but it's a gigabyte in size. And then we could extrude some kind of, what I'm thinking is some kind of UX that says we're huge, evaluates to some kind of summary box, for example, but then underneath the summary box, there's a little blue thing that says this, the same thing that we do elsewhere. This wasn't stored. Do you want to store it? See what I'm saying? This is actually not a stupid idea.
Yeah, but what?
I don't understand it.
Okay, so let me explain. So let's say we do let's say we do one of these.
But you don't want to have to use a UI every time you do a finite element operation.
No, you don't touch the UI. Okay, here's what would happen. Okay, so you see this. Okay, store full expression in notebook. Okay, so now let's imagine in this case here, right, that it said in addition that not stored in out 14.
Well,
right?
it can't say that because the only reason the store full expression or even the show more and show less buttons work is precisely because it was stored in out of 14.
I understand that. But so then let's imagine that you blew out of both the output size limiter and the storage size limiter. Okay? Then what I'm suggesting is that this footer here would then say something different.
And if you put a semicolon there, you suddenly start seeing a UI. That's pretty weird.
Well, I don't think it's that weird. I don't think it's that weird. I understand. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. I understand what you're saying. We're dealing with we're dealing with multiple. Okay, I don't think it's a bad solution. So can we walk through this, please, for a second? Okay, so let's imagine that you hit the out size limiter. Okay, then what this would say is you wouldn't have these options. You would just see the visual here. Which is pretty inadequate. Like, what's the point? Well, okay, so the more common case is that you would see something which is a blob here. You wouldn't hit the output size limiter. You would just see a blob. Let's import a blob of some kind here, okay? And then underneath the blob, it would say, this blob is not connected to the out. So the way to do that, I think, would be to change what the out looks like, perhaps. Yes, that's the obvious thing to do. And then if you don't like that, you press, the out looks different, and it says, and maybe there's a plus underneath the out, which you can go to try and to ask to reevaluate and store it. Another possibility, guys, in fact, this might be the best possibility, is you do store it right when it's generated, okay? But you put it into essentially a circular buffer where it goes away. If you didn't say, store it now, you lost your chance. And when out 15 is generated, it's gone. See what I'm saying?
Based on size.
Yeah. This only happens if it's huge, right?
So this is like dollar history length of 5 or something based on size. So if you exceed that, you delete the last 5, the last one that.
Yes, that's fine. Yeah, I agree. That is what that's like, or dollar history length of 1 or something. For this,
something like that.
Yeah, it's a dollar history length.
So you can use.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. That's not a bad idea. So listen,
that's not crazy.
Then what we've got
better than this UI thing.
No, wait a second. They're both sensible. Okay, so the idea would be there's 2 dollar history lengths. Okay, one is that applies to all expressions, and the other is one that applies either only to expressions above some size, or there's a history length that is based on the total size of the out expressions. Rather than a length as in the number of out expressions, it's based on the total size of the out expressions. Am I making sense?
Well, that means you would have to compute the byte count of every single out, which
we're not doing right now.
Yes, and it's potentially expensive.
Okay. Well, but I mean, wait a minute. Wait a second. The one thing that isn't expensive is it bigger than X? Because you go and you start recursing, and by the time it's bigger than X, you say it's bigger than X. Right. The thing had turned out to be a 5.
Are we already measuring the size of every output with the size limiter?
Yeah, but there might be a semicolon here, so no.
We're measuring the output size in boxes, not in.
Yes. Sorry, my bad.
But we don't apply the output limiter if it's null or it's like a default thing.
Oh, sure, we don't.
I mean, this
and the output limiter has other sorts of rules, like graphics don't count.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about this case. Okay, so what I like quite a bit is something, either it's if it was implementable, it would be this, if it gets bigger than, I mean, maybe there's a single expression size limit, okay, at which the thing is stored only temporarily.
I think that's okay. That's not crazy.
Okay, but fine. But and whether that's stored in a circular buffer of size 5 or what, I don't know. But my suggestion is when that happened, when it isn't actually attached to out 14, the out 14 fuzzes out in some way visually.
Yeah, fine.
And it gives you the chance. It has a UI element that gives you the chance to say, no, I really want this. Store it.
Before it's gone.
Before it's gone. Yes.
Yeah,
once
fine.
It's gone, it's gone. Right.
Yeah.
Once it exited the circular buffer, it's gone. Okay. I like this solution. Okay.
Right,
I think
so I guess so. I have 2 questions. One, so the history length and the size limiter, whatever it is we want to call it, are those global? Are those per notebook? Possibly both.
I'm not sure, but hold on. Let me ask a question. The output size limiter, how is that controllable? Is there a dollar variable that controls the
output size limit?
Okay. By the way,
it can also be set via the preferences.
Yeah, there's a front end option, but the front end option basically just works by setting that kernel global.
Okay. All right. So this then. Okay, so we would have a similar thing to that for a storage limit. for expressions. And when the storage limit is exceeded, we need a design here. This thing, like what happens when it goes, out of dot, when the thing is no longer stored, when you reopen the notebook. It's something a bit like that. It's something where the thing looks, I don't know, maybe it goes a gray color and it falls over in italics, like it died type thing. And then it has a little plus underneath it. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And then you press the plus, it gives you a UI. The UI says store this expression permanently, and it also gives you the possibility of going to settings to change that setting overall. Okay, now the question is the setting. Do you want that on a per notebook basis? And I don't think we care terribly. I mean,
well, that's easy.
Okay.
I mean, do we care? Walk me through that. I mean, is it because Oliver wants
I guess the question is, are you going to freak out when, Oliver, sets this at the beginning of his documentation?
Sets what?
This
shouldn't need to, because whatever it's set to,
you won't need to. I don't.
Yeah,
think.
I mean, what are we going to set it to? What value are we going to set this to? 50 megabytes? What value are we going to set it to?
Well, I would
100 megabytes.
I think it should be relatively large, and
well, okay. Let's say that. Okay, let's look at this. Okay, so I've got 56 gigabytes in principle. Go ahead. Do you believe that number?
I'm not sure how much I believe that number. I mean, the problem is, what does memory available even mean in modern operating systems?
I know. But I mean, it gives some rough order of magnitude. This isn't a tiny machine. I know it's not a tiny machine. Given that amount of memory available, maybe saying half a gigabyte is not unreasonable. Well, I don't know. What do you guys think? What do you think? What would you want it set to?
Well, I would want to keep this at infinity, because I don't want to lose things, and
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I was thinking not for myself, but for you, Stephen, if I don't know how much you rely on percent when you're doing like your huge multi-way graph experiments.
Yeah, I do rely on percent, so I'd probably want this set to infinity. Okay, so that means we probably have to do it on a notebook by notebook basis, that it's settable in the style sheet.
Okay.
So how would that work? John, how would that work?
Well, we could certainly set it uniformly for all documentation notebooks.
Yes.
And that might be a very reasonable thing to do. Right.
Fine.
The only thing that could possibly break would be examples that relied on percent, and we can check for that.
Yeah.
To see if there are any outliers we should be aware of.
All right.
Right. The other question is, if you are in a standalone kernel, then A, is this applicable, and B, is there a way to say ex post facto, oh, I actually do want to save that in out?
I don't think it's terribly applicable. I think this is a notebook story. I think. Well, let me think about this for a second.
Well, you could still have the...
No, you can still have the variable. It just says don't store this, dollar just... whatever, and you wouldn't set it by default. By default, just like $HistoryLength, it will be set to infinity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And and then we don't have any mechanism for adding it to out. If you want to say if the last out is bigger than you expected, then you need to say X equals percent in order to
correct
going away.
Yeah.
Okay.
But X equals the thing originally, not percent, because percent doesn't store anything because it got.
I see. So it's not actually in percent, right? It's
no. You could do X equals percent, so long as percent's still there. So
Well, in
even,
other words, we'd allow the circular buffer mechanism.
Yeah.
In the pure kernel.
yeah, it'll work similar to.
Okay, what are we going to call the variable that is the size limiter here? What is the variable called?
I think $history size limit.
Yeah, why not?
I mean, we have
History element size limits, history.
either history element or history entry size limit.
As opposed to out size limit, which is probably too obscure.
Well, it's called history length, so it should be parallel to.
Entry sounds like it's, an exit entryway type thing.
Okay. Yeah, I would be okay with history element.
All right.
Yeah, and then we'll have a corresponding front end option, which is just that without the $sign. Same way as we do for output size limit.
Right,
Fine.
and I guess the other question is what happens if you have percent? So sorry, not percent. You end with the semicolon, so there's no out. In a note.
I see. So you don't see it.
Right.
I think we need some kind of indicator. That's a UX thing. That's part of the UX design.
Okay.
Yeah, because that case is even a bit more insidious. Because you don't even see it, and then it goes, and you thought it was there, but then it goes away. So let's just see, John. Let's say I say
Well, we already obscure the out label in the case where the kernel session is gone.
Well, we obscure, but look, there is no out label here. So the question is, where is the handle?
Well, and
the
end labels too. We also do the end labels
with a dot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we need to decorate that.
And in the output size limiter, we also do that, which you can see if you just want to quit and then start a fresh kernel, and you'll see some things update in the notebook. And there you can see the output size limiter changed.
Yep.
And of course all of the in and outs.
Okay, this needs some design. I don't know what it is.
Okay.
I mean, it probably needs some kind of little X or something below the in label that indicates that the out disappeared, or I don't know what. We'll have to figure that out.
Yeah, and it should be said that right now the front end doesn't have a good way of being notified by the kernel that these sorts of changes happen. I mean, it might be nice, for example, if we could establish, say, a dependency on out2, and in the same way that we, in dynamic, we can establish a dependency on X, and the kernel lets us know if X changes. But that same trick does not work for checking a specific down value. It's a thing that people have asked for, but I assume it's probably hard on the kernel side.
Tom would know. Tom?
So sorry, I missed that.
The idea of, in the same way that we can have the kernel notify the front end if X changes, but what about X with what about a specific down value? What if, can we imagine a world where the front end could say, kernel, notify me if out of 2 changes?
Well, if it was specifically just for out, then I mean, obviously this is the kernel would have a mechanism for clearing things, so it would notify the front end when it does that.
Okay, well, I mean, that's.
I mean, it's not a general mechanism for any down value, but it would work for this.
Right. Okay. Well, yes. I mean, there are 2 sorts of ways. Yes, if you're suggesting to provide a specialized thing, that would be great. I was sort of, needling in for the possibility of a down value specific notification because lots of people have requested that sort of thing.
Well, I don't really understand what that means in general, other than just
it means other than just not the symbol, but it means the symbol with its argument.
Yeah, I'm still a bit hazy about that.
Okay, can we dispatch? Okay, this rounding radius thing seems to me the obvious thing to do is to allow an association syntax.
Which is
this
what?
Syntax is okay. What's that?
I mean, this syntax is, with one minor exception that I realized earlier today. This syntax is copying syntax that is used in many places for front-end options. And we have talked about using association syntax, but we don't have a place to even begin. There is no precedent for doing this sort of thing.
Well, there is plenty of precedent in the kernel. I mean, this would be rounding radius, arrow,
right. Well, right. But associations mean something different in the front end. They change the inheritance.
Well, let's set that aside for the moment.
No, I'm saying rounding radius goes to this. That would be how I would expect this to look in a kernel situation.
Well, that makes no sense, right?
I mean, what is the default value for unspecified corners?
0. Look,
but what if you want to specify a default value? I suppose you could have a default key.
I assume that we can do this. Let me just try it. I assume I can say left arrow 15, top arrow 15.
Well,
I think that'll work. Yeah.
No, but why is it different from this?
Oh, Stephen, think about it. It's 4 corners.
One denotes the top left corner, and that's saying make the left two.
Oh, silly me. Okay, now I understand what the syntax is.
Right. I mean, I think right. And see, I don't know what you did is supposed to mean. Well, I guess you used the same, but if you made
no, I was confused. I was confused. Don't worry about it. I was confused. This syntax is perfectly reasonable and kind of cute.
Right. I mean, I think the one interesting question is, do you have to specify the 5? And if you leave it out, does it default to 0 or does it default to something from the environment?
I think here it's defaulting to 0, which seems reasonable to me.
John, I asked you to email
well,
me. So
yes, I mean, the fact that this works is probably a bit accidental, but yes,
think it's cool.
But yes, I mean, we can make sure that it officially supports and documents, that it supports defaulting to 0. I'm not fundamentally opposed to that. I didn't write it in my first draft of documentation because it's not how other similar options have worked, but I agree that it's a sensible sort of thing to want.
I think this is very cool. I think it's useful. I think that
well, I mean, it's definitely useful because this is the only way without using like 9 patches or something like that you can assemble pieces of a thing together that has a rounded rectangle around the element as a whole.
We have 9 patch, right? What is it called?
Oh, we have 9 patch, but it's not documented.
Really?
Yeah, we use it all over the place, but because in order for it to make sense, we would also need functions that can construct 9 patches for you or interpret 9 patches for you. I mean, there's like an ecosystem that would be required, and I just haven't had the energy to put together that ecosystem. I mean, don't you just give the patches in the 9 patch, or do you have to give a bunch of other stuff? A 9 patch has inside the bitmap. It has, basically the edges of the bitmap encode what the patches are.
Yeah.
And that has to be done in a particular way. If it's not done right, then it's not a 9 patch anymore. It's just a bitmap.
I see.
And I mean, it's not insane. You know, you know,
So I don't understand why
this would be totally the sort of thing like we could be you know, an intern project or a summer school project or something. But it's just, as we talked about earlier with priorities, I can't justify.
Okay. Why isn't that going to the image processing team? Isn't it for them to generate a bitmap that is appropriate to be a 9 patch? Like, for example, could we not import an image and make it a 9 patch?
Well, I think it's entirely reasonable for the image processing team to do. Yeah.
Carlo, do it.
But most of this, I mean, let me be clear. It's, you know, the functionality is not exotic. Most of this is just about designing the functions themselves. Not implementation is easy. It's the design.
I understand. So can we ask the image processing team to take a look at it? Because my prediction is that this is really something that ends up being something where you take an image and you want to 9-patchify it.
That's exactly right. Or on the other hand, you might want to take an existing 9-patch and understand what it means, how it splits up, and maybe modify it in some way.
Yeah, I get it. I think we should give that to the image processing team.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
But my earlier point being that, you know, if you're trying to throw a rounded rectangle around composite things that fit together side by side, that doing something like this may be your only option.
Right, and it's nice. Okay, let's just move on to the last item here, sequence alignment.
This is a pretty simple issue, so I think, right? So basically, right, you can sequence alignment lists and you can sequence alignment strings, and you can sequence alignment lists of lists. But once you do that, the output becomes ambiguous, because you'll notice that in the first one, I'm aligning a thing with itself, so there's perfect alignment. And in the second input, I'm aligning two different things and I'm producing identical output. So you can't sort of distinguish between a list denoting a difference pair and a list that's simply a common argument to the two lists. So the solution would be to add a second argument, or I guess a third argument to sequence alignment. That's the head to use for the differences. So then that second output,
so you could say rule or something like that. And if you said rule, then it would show those things not with pairs of lists, but with a
rule. Yep.
Okay. My only concern here is, and I don't know if anybody from the biology team has been contacted about this. I don't know how much tentacle, you know, how many octopodal, you know, how many more tentacles are needed for sequence alignment. See what I'm saying? I don't know whether there are other things that aren't options. For example, why on earth is merge differences not a link? That seems like a bug in documentation.
Well, either there are no examples, or
it seems like a bug, so we should get it fixed. Combine adjacent differences. My only question here is whether the head should come as a first argument, as an optional first argument. That's two questions. One, multiple sequence alignment, which I don't understand very well, and whether this might need to be var-args, and therefore this would need to be an option. And two, whether this should be a pre-head rather than a post-head.
Okay.
Probably it can be a post-head, just like distribute and things like that, of post-heads. But can we please talk to the biology team and make sure they are not, we are about to enhance sequence alignment to have 17 new arguments?
Okay, so that would be
Michael. Start with Michael.
Okay.
It's not specifically him who's dealing with this function, but he will know.
Okay. Yeah, and right, this came precisely because Lou was looking at three-way diff, and that's when he realized this ambiguity, and therefore could not use sequence alignment for three-way diff.
Ouch. Ouch. Well, okay, fine. I mean, is there an option that we could use that would represent this head thing? I mean, it seems more natural as an argument if this thing really is a firmly two-argument object. I mean, we have functions which sort of wrap a hold in certain cases and so on.
Right, and in those cases, I think it's almost always
an argument.
An argument. The
But
one.
Is there any case where it isn't?
There in arguments options, it's a element of an association. So there's a string key, but not a symbol.
Okay. All right. Well, then let's assume.
Okay, I'll check with Michael, and if assuming
Right.
we don't anticipate another argument, then we can.
All right. Sounds good. Okay. Anything else, guys?
Nope.
Okay. Thanks a lot. See you later.
Bye.
Thanks.